Chapter 2 Sidetracked. The rising morning sun shone throughout the house, drawing attention to a certain object of value fixated upon the wall. Ren was almost blinded by the gleaming steel blade. Slowly snaking towards the weapon in a trance, he felt as though the sword was calling, beckoning him to come closer. He truly believed the legends about swords having souls, since after all, the katana contained his father's essence, or whatever was left of him. Sometimes in moments of enlightenment, he would see a familiar face from within the steel, but it wasn't his own reflection. When this would happen, it would unnerve Ren so much that he'd be traumatized for days. He started to become more comfortable with these visitations the more frequently they occurred. Eventually, Ren and the ghost of his late father, Hattori, would go on to have full conversations together. Once taken aback by the supernatural phenomenon, Ren questioned the strange presence. "Whatever this is that's happening right now, if you're who I think you are, reveal yourself. Have you been watching me this whole time?" The face offered an overdue explanation. "Hello, Ren. Unfortunately for you, I've been here watching all the while. Well, at least whenever the sword is unsheathed. But I can still hear everything." Ren was mortified and disturbed by what he had heard, as the echoing voice continued. "I was waiting for the right moment to reveal myself. I believe now is the time. I'm not exactly your father anymore. That was a body I inhabited a long time ago. You can call me H for short. I'm his soul." At the time, it was too much for the foreigner to process. He had just witnessed his father, or at least some form of him, come back from the dead. Now the apparition's appearance had become easier to digest. It had been a while since they had last spoken. Ren had dismissed the incidents as hallucinations, most likely a result of him being on his own for such an extensive period, practically living as a hermit. This time, Ren did not see H in the sword. Perhaps he wasn't looking hard enough. Though the weapon was quite old, it had been kept in good condition for generations. There weren't any significant defects or signs of wear. The diamond-laced handle and curved nature of the sword was an iconic part of Japanese history. Ren cherished carrying something with him that was more than just a weapon, but a legacy, and moreover, a symbol. Lost in his own thoughts, he remembered the moment he was first given the sword as a young boy. "This is no ordinary katana, son. It shouldn't be used merely to kill. Think of it as an instrument to decide between taking one's life and sparing another's death," his father said. Ren held his sword firmly, admiring its fine craftsmanship. "When I was your age, I'd spend long hours training in the family dojo with this katana each day. Grandpa never told me the secret to mastering the art. He wanted me to figure it out for myself. I became quite frustrated after years of trying and failing to find the secret. Then one day, it finally came to me. I was alone in the dojo, training to build up strength in my hands, to better my sword-wielding techniques. It was just me and a wooden training dummy. After taking out my rage on the dummy with a series of deadly punches, it remained surprisingly unscathed. There wasn't one chip or scratch anywhere to be found. I stopped to sit down in front of the dummy. Its sturdy body could withstand countless blows from my fists, and it wouldn't budge. You see, that was exactly the point. It wasn't moving, but had remained completely still. I started rolling on the floor, laughing hysterically. The lifeless dummy had the upper hand in this fight, not me. That's when I realized that defending can be just as effective as attacking. It is vital to preserve your body's energy. Find your opponent's weakness and strike with precision and certainty, but never let the sword control your emotions. You must find balance within yourself and the katana. Only then will you become a worthy swordsman. Use it wisely, and I shall trust it in your hands." His father gave him a nod of understanding and met his son's joyous expression. The young Ren tightened his grip on the handle and pulled it closer to his chest. He could feel his heart beating fast. It was an instance of pure ecstasy. The memory whipped away from him like dissipating smoke. What once felt heavy in Ren's arms was now a well-balanced blade. Most days the sword remained mounted to the wall, collecting dust, but today he would need it by his side. Before leaving, he planned to get rid of any evidence left behind in the shack. Fingerprints would be easy to find throughout the home, especially in the kitchen, where the appliances were used daily. Ren put on gloves before he got started with cleaning the kitchen. With a soapy rag in hand, he scrubbed the glass top of the stove and sides of the refrigerator. As he wiped down the fridge in circular motions, his focus shifted to a couple of magnetized photographs. One of them was a family portrait taken when he was a small child. His mother wore a flower-embroidered ceremonial kimono and a tight bun in her raven hair, while his father sported a business suit and his signature studious glasses. Ren's younger, happier self was virtually unrecognizable next to his mom and dad. He felt as though his childhood was slipping away from relevancy. When thinking back to the past, he couldn't help but compare his often painful and remorseful adolescence to simpler times. The other photo was of a young lady wearing black-tinted sunglasses. Her pastel pink fingernails held the glasses down a little to expose her almond eyes. The woman had once shared the same precious space with him, but now keeping her photograph nearby was all he had. Ren suppressed his feeling towards her in the years they spent apart from each other. He dared never to even mutter her name. Though they shared many fond memories together, he knew whatever they had wasn't meant to last. Perhaps it was better to let it fade. To even consider having a companion was impractical. Determined to remain a free man as much as possible, Ren made sure to quickly wash away any trace of DNA he might have left inside. The task had been completed in roughly 10 minutes, which left 20 minutes to spare. There was little else to do before he would leave his place of solitude. Ren looked around the home and felt a wave of emotions hitting him. It was no secret that he had grown attached to his current residence. The shack was one of his most prized accomplishments. It was a shame to see all the work that went into it go to waste. The investigators would rip the place apart, looking for evidence. Standing in the center of the room, Ren studied the simplicity of the home's interior. The open kitchen, which was located on the far right of the room, was met by a wall to the left, beside the bathroom and closet. The living room contained a twin-size bed, which occupied the center left wall. On the opposite side of the room, located near the entrance, was the meditation area. The placement of this section was deliberate, as there were 2 windows opposite the door that offered a decent view of the swamp. Outside, grotesque moss from the overhanging trees moved slightly in the morning breeze. They appeared as oppressive hands closing in on the shelter, threatening to compromise any notion of security. Ren sat down cross-legged on the tatami mat and took in the quiet of the moment. Closing his eyes, the foreigner's worries temporarily drifted away from the first deep breath. Meditation was an essential part of his being. The more he meditated, the more focused he became. Ren concentrated on the sound of his steady breath. He counted to 3 and was gone. An exotic landscape formed in his mind as he was transported to an otherworldly plane of existence. Entering into this new reality, Ren's body was not in control, though he was advancing forward in a slow automatic stride. It felt like he was sleepwalking, except his eyes were wide open. The serene place he encountered hosted a majestic pond surrounded by cherry blossoms at dusk. The shimmering water remained undisturbed as he drew closer. Hovering over the pond, Ren peered into the water as pink leaves from the trees fell. With his index finger, he lightly touched the surface of the pond, sending a series of currents that interrupted the water's calm. Ren noticed his hands were distinctly dirty, which was off-putting. Desperately, he tried to wash the dirt off of his hands in the pond. They appeared to be even filthier than before. He kept splashing water on them again and again, but they remained surprisingly unclean. Somehow the dirt was stuck to his skin and was apparently accumulating. No matter how much he tried to wash the dirt away, it would simply not come off. Feeling something crawling in his hands, he looked in horror to find several tiny maggots writhing around underneath his skin. The worm-like creatures ate away at his flesh, trying to escape from the inside. As they tore their way out, blood gushed from newly opened wounds and dripped down into the pond below. The color of the water became darker by the second until it was completely black. In that moment, Ren snapped out of his meditative state. He shook his head violently in an effort to recover. Should I take this as a sign of things to come? What could this possibly mean? Ren questioned the implications of the premonition. At least I didn't die this time. What he saw was intense, but he had experienced far worse visions before. Directly under from where the sword hung, there was a trap door in the floorboard, underneath the mat. Feeling sudden adrenaline rushing through him, Ren frantically pulled the tatami back and opened the secret compartment. Inside there was a gun case that was kept hidden. As he reached down to grab the case, a familiar ominous sound pierced through his eardrums, forcing him to pause for a moment. It was the sound of his father's booming voice. Rin disregarded the firearm and stood back up to the wall-mounted katana with squinted eyes. Taking the sword in his grip, he gradually opened his eyelids, anxiously anticipating meeting the ghostly head's gaze once again. A drop of sweat from Ren's arm fell through the cracks of the wooden floor. He reckoned that his senses were alert as ever. The sound of the droplet meeting the ground below confirmed his suspicions. A familiar face returned within the steel with apparent disappointment as H began to lecture. You can't go on killing so mercilessly. Those fools that tracked you down could have been handled differently. Did you actually think they were going to be a real threat? It could have been a simple bar fight. You could have left it at that. Now you've got another mess to clean up. The other members will retaliate. There's no doubt about that. Sure, I could have gone easy on them and let them live. Either way, the gang still would have been on my tail, Ren said scornfully, staring intently into the blade in front of him as he held it tight in his hands. This isn't a road to redemption. This is a path of devastation. The man you've become is not the same son I raised, but something else entirely. You said it yourself before. You're not my father anymore. He's dead, remember? A lot has happened since we last saw each other in person. I'm not a boy anymore. I've changed. It's time for you to accept that, Ren said. As a result of your misguided actions, we have bigger problems ahead of us. You have much work to do, the phantom face said before disappearing from view. Ren knew he was anxious, but still capable of holding his own. There had been many opportunities for Ren to act on his feelings, his deepest emotions, but he had been holding it all back, saving it for this very moment. Ren grabbed a white tank top and a pair of pants from the closet and got dressed. He then selected his weapons of choice, a revolver and the katana, before setting off into the swamp.